Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study. A plain and simple, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we're in the book of Jeremiah. And Jeremiah is, I- I'm, I'm tickled because the last couple of sessions we've been profiling these false prophets uh, of today who want to heap grandiose titles, the grand title of prophet on them. But we're going to see that Jeremiah, a true prophet, this was no easy cakewalk, as they say. All right, I want to get back into it because I want to get into something today that you don't see me deal with a lot. Cultural issues, political issues, but I'm going to deal with this one. So let's bring up uh, what I'm going to deal with here. Let me go back. Jeremiah chapter 1 says, and I'll read it. I'm going to start reading from verse 1. The words of Jeremiah, the son of Hilkiah, one of the priests living in uh, Anathoth, Anathoth, in the territory of Benjamin. The word of the Lord came to him in the 13th year of the reign of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah. It also came throughout the days of Jehoiakim, son of Josiah, the king of Judah, to the 5th month of the 11th year of Zedekiah, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, when the people of Jerusalem went into exile. So right away we see these prophecies, timeline. Um, Verse 4 says, Then the word of the Lord came to me. I chose you before I formed you in the womb. I set you apart before you were born. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. So what I want to kind of look at here, excuse me, and I don't deal with this a lot, this issue of when does life happen? Okay, when does life happen? Now, one of the reasons why I don't deal with it because I resist dealing with a cultural slash political fight and war. So right now there is a war, an abortion war versus pro-life. So pro-choice versus pro-life. And this war is raging now. And Christians have latched on to this. Now they have been latched on to this. You go back to the 60s when the conservative Christians, okay, so now pretty much under the umbrella of evangelical, decided to throw their hat into the political ring. And one of back then, believe it or not, there were several talking points. In other words, this is why we're doing this. One of them was abortion, gay rights. Here were some of a couple of the other ones that they've kind of dropped, right, from the platform. Prayer in public school, okay, prayer in public school. The flag, the United States flag. It's still a part of the platform, but you don't hear them really talk about it, okay, except if a black guy kneels. But I digress. But so, but so back then, however, they wanted to push, okay, a political platform, and then they gained a lot of ground during the 70s and 80s. Um, you could say that groups like Jerry Falwell's The Moral Majority certainly rallied votes to get people like Ronald Reagan elected. You come to around the 2000s when George W. Bush got elected. There was a big drive then from the evangelical vote. Now, why am I going through this? Because one of the reasons why I resist kind of getting into the argument is because uh, part of the problem is evangelicals, the reason behind their fight, okay? And their reasoning behind a lot of the issues that they are fighting for is to try to preserve, reestablish a Christian nation. And I'll go a step further and say a white Christian nation. Now, for that reason, so the evangelical church, in other words, that's their motivation. So the problem, of course, is that if there is going to be, if there's going to be, if you're going to establish a Christian nation, well, how does that look in Scripture? I'm not going to dive into that. But my point is that's their motivation. But they're losing the culture war. In other words, they're not going to win the abortion fight. Just like now, if you think about what's going on in Texas. Okay, Texas passed a law, and then they keep heaping these laws up. Two of the leading states, Texas and Florida. I'm going to mention something about Florida in a moment. So what happened when these states, and there are more states that have passed anti-abortion laws. So what happens with them? Well, people just go to another state. So in other words, you got the country that's split down the middle. So if you want an abortion, you just go to the other states where they provide for it. Now the fight, of course, is to get these laws reversed. I personally think they will win this eventually. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. But so then we have to look at it from a Christian standpoint. Is that what is that? So that's the fight. And again, we can go a step further to say that you're really not pro-life. In other words, it's you don't really they really don't care about the baby in the womb, and they certainly don't care about the baby outside of the womb. Okay, they really don't care about that. So it's kind of just kind of this political thing that they're doing, and that's why I resist kind of getting into that. Now, however, then we can have a discussion on what is pro-life, and I think when we have verses like what we just read, we can certainly see that there are pro-life. There is pro-life, and when we say this, now let me go make one more statement before I kind of move on, because I did want to say this about Florida in terms of the motivation behind the conservative, and then how evangelical Christians have latched on to the conservative movement. So then you could say there's conservative Christians, conservative evangelicals. And as I said, that their aim is about power, not about even the righteousness of what they're fighting for. So in other words, pro-life. They're not, as I said, they really don't care about that. So for example, in Florida, you have a group called Moms for Liberty who fought, to ban books. They were present when the governor signed the anti-gay bills. And now one of the leaders of the movement is caught up in a sex scandal, a gay sex scandal. Okay, so my point is, so when you see that, and of course, this is multiplied over and over and over again. So the real motivation for the conservative movement to try to, in other words, so they certainly team up with the conservative Christians, conservative evangelicals. Why? Numbers. Let's try to get people in office. Right? So if you get people in office, they can vote our way. Even if some of these people, you think about the congressman that just got expelled. Look how long it took for them to expel him. And the reason why they did not want, even the conservative House Speaker now, supposed to be most holy Christian, was the one who did not want to expel him. Why? He didn't care about his morality. It's this vote that he was holding on to. And that's the thing. So it's the power. One of the greatest things that Trump did for the conservative movement was he stacked judges, and especially the Supreme Court, because now the hope is they could vote these conservative um, issues in. Okay, now, um, but when we come back, let me say this too. One of the reasons why I'm not going to get into so much as the abortion issue, and it could be also the gay issue, because those are the two dominating talking points from the conservative side, conservative evangelical side. And as I said, be careful about that because judgment comes, right? Because you find all these people who in the closet, okay? But it's about a power thing, and I'm not going to get roped into your power struggle, which typically is not going to include me anyway. It's not going to benefit me anyway, okay? So the Christians are fighting then a failing war. And one reason is because in your fight, you do not reach people for the Lord. That is my biggest objection is you don't reach people for the Lord. You seek political power, but okay, so just like let's go back now, look at the two there are a lot of states. I think Kansas is one of them too, but the two ones that you see probably prominently in the news, Florida and Texas. So you pass these laws and say, well, you can't have an abortion. Like now, it's in the news as we speak, right? One big case about the abortion issue right now. Are people coming to the Lord because of the law that's passed? Now, people may say, well, we're trying to save babies. Really? Yet you say with the same breath, you will say, send the migrants back. Send the migrant children back. The immigrants, I'm sorry, immigrant children. Send them back. Oh, excuse me. Right? Send them back. Well, where's the care? Where's the pro-life care for them? I'm not going to even get into the conflict in the Middle East right now, where you have the bombing of civilians. Where's the pro-life outcry? Here's my point. That's why I don't get in. I don't want to get dragged into. I don't want to get dragged into that debate. So now what I want to do is, but let's talk about what is life. So from a Christian standpoint, and by the way, do you know how many Christians are getting secret abortions? See, the problem is that if you don't solve sin, you're not going to solve the abortion issue. The way you solve an abortion issue is by turning people to the Lord, turning people to Christ. A lot of Christians, if they fornicate and they get pregnant, how do they solve that? Many of them will sneak in the back doors of abortion clinics. Many of them. But I do want to kind of emphasize this, that how does God see life? And what is interesting here is that notice here, this is what God is telling Jeremiah. I chose you before I formed you in the womb. I set you apart before you were born and appointed you a prophet to the nations. So God looks at life before the womb. Now, sinful people will try to say life doesn't begin, it's a blob, it's whatever, but they never, ever, ever can answer or will answer the question, well, so when does actual life begin? Right? Well, when does life actually begins? And I'm going to even say this, I'm going to say life begins when God starts life. Because think about this, before you were born, before the foundation of the world, in God's mind, every life was already conceived by him. So I was before the foundation of the world. And that's why he says, God saw Jeremiah before the womb. Okay? Before the womb. Think about this now. We go back up here. King Josiah, remember in our last session, nearly 300 years before he was born, God called him by name. Jeremiah, the Apostle Paul, saying, God called me as an apostle to the Gentiles, right? Before I was born, God called me. Now, this is only valuable then in terms of life. This is only valuable unless we see things from God's perspective. And I say that because the evangelical church has had a horrible, horrible track record in this respect. That when we go back, if you're going to be pro-life, and pro-life is not just in the womb, as we see, pro-life is before the womb, because that's what how God see us. Before the womb, in the womb, but also after the womb. If you're truly pro-life, how do you treat your fellow man? See? So while you may say, I am pro-life, let too many dark-skinned people move into your city, start attending your church. You want to flee. You want to flee. As I said before, look at how many people are looking at the migrant situation right now. Where is your pro-life for that? See? And so therefore, if we really want to say we're pro-life, then we're going to look at life as God looks at life. And ultimately, we're going to look at life. I'll close out with this verse. That ultimately, let me bring it up. It is too good not to bring up. Many of y'all know this verse of scripture. It is one of the most famous scriptures. One of the most famous scriptures in the Bible. John 3:16. For God so loved the world in this way, he gave his one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. And one of the things I find so precious about this verse, notice God loved the world. So this, first of all, the world. He wasn't just cultural. He wasn't racial, right? God loved the world. Gender. He wasn't gender. God loved the world. That what he gave his only Son. And one of the things I like about this is because what this demonstrates and what this describes is the value that God placed on every life. See, every life that he gave the very best he could give. God could not give a better gift than Jesus. He could not create a better creation than Jesus. And thus, by giving the very best that he could give for us, he demonstrated the value. And we're supposed to reflect the same value towards one another. And the shame has been that the evangelical church Christians have been just as prejudiced, just as bad as the world to our shame. Okay. So, all right, guys. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome, and I'll see you in the next study.